Imagine waking up to the news. Yellowstone has erupted. The sky turns black, and ash begins to fall like snow over entire cities. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now because what you are about to discover could one day decide the future of humanity. Ash raining down for weeks, the sun disappearing for years. What would happen to our food, our air, our very survival? This isn't just a movie plot. It's a terrifying possibility we must confront. Beneath our feet, hidden deep inside the earth, lies a world of fire. Magma swells in enormous underground chambers, constantly pressing upward, searching for a weakness in the crust above. Most of the time, this pressure is released in small doses, an earthquake here, a volcanic eruption there, but sometimes, rarely, the Earth stores its energy for hundreds of thousands of years, until one day it releases it all at once. That moment is what scientists call a supervolcano eruption. Unlike ordinary volcanoes that rise into sharp mountains, a supervolcano hides in plain sight. Yellowstone looks like a beautiful park filled with lakes, forests, and geysers, but beneath it lies a chamber so vast it could fit several mountain ranges inside. When it last erupted 640,000 years ago, the blast threw more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of ash and rock into the air. To put that into perspective, it was more than 1,000 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens in 1980. If such an eruption happened today, life across the planet would be changed in an instant. Ash would cover entire states within hours. Plains would fall silent, crops would be destroyed, and within days, the skies of Earth would grow darker and colder. Humanity has never faced such a challenge in modern history, but the Earth has given us warnings before. 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano in Indonesia exploded with unimaginable force. Ash spread across continents, blocking sunlight and cooling the planet. Scientists believe temperatures dropped so suddenly that it may have triggered a volcanic winter. Human beings who had only just begun to spread across the world were pushed to the edge of extinction. Some evidence suggests only a few thousand survived. Every person alive today may be descended from those survivors who endured years of darkness and hunger. The frightening truth is that supervolcanoes do not erupt often, but when they do, they reshape the course of life on Earth. And Yellowstone, with all its beauty and wonder, is not just a national park. It is one of the largest ticking time bombs on the planet. Geysers that spray boiling water into the air, hot springs that bubble endlessly, and earthquakes that ripple quietly across the region are all whispers of the giant below, reminding us that the Earth is never truly still. We measure time in years, in decades, in centuries, but the Earth measures time in ages, in cycles that stretch far beyond human memory. 640,000 years have passed since Yellowstone last erupted. To us, that feels like an eternity, but to the Earth, it is only the blink of an eye. The cycle continues, and though we cannot say when, the giant beneath will one day awaken again. And when it does, the first signs will be subtle. Small earthquakes will rattle the ground. Geysers will erupt more violently. The land itself may rise, swelling as magma pushes upward. To the casual eye, these will be curiosities, tourist attractions, moments of wonder. But to those who understand the language of the Earth, they will be warnings. Warnings of a storm far greater than any in human history. The day Yellowstone erupts, the morning will begin like any other. People will drink their coffee. Children will go to school. Flights will take off into clear skies. And then, suddenly, the ground will split. A deafening roar will fill the air as the Earth tears open. A column of fire and ash will shoot into the sky, higher than any storm cloud. Darkness will fall across the land, not for minutes or hours, but for weeks and months. This is the nightmare of the supervolcano, and it is a nightmare that science assures us is not impossible, only inevitable. The question is not if, but when.
When we think of disasters, we imagine hurricanes, earthquakes, or even asteroid impacts. But the scale of a supervolcano eruption dwarfs them all. It is the only natural event on Earth that has the power to affect the entire planet at once. The blast itself would devastate everything within hundreds of kilometers. Entire towns and cities would vanish in seconds. Pyroclastic flows, searing avalanches of ash, rock, and gas, moving faster than any car, would sweep across the land, leaving nothing alive in their path. Those who lived within this deadly zone would never have a chance to escape. Beyond this circle of fire, the rain of ash would begin. Ash is not like the soft dust of a fireplace. It is made of microscopic shards of volcanic glass and rock, razor-sharp particles that cut into lungs, corrode engines, and crush rooftops under their weight. Within hours, millions would be struggling to breathe. Roads would be buried, power grids would collapse, and water systems would be contaminated. The modern world, so dependent on fragile infrastructure, would grind to a halt. And yet, this would only be the beginning. The true danger of a supervolcano eruption lies not only in the blast itself, but in what follows. The ash thrown into the atmosphere would circle the globe, blocking sunlight. Temperatures would drop by several degrees, triggering what scientists call a volcanic winter. Crops would fail, growing seasons would collapse. Food shortages would spread not just in the region of the eruption, but across every continent. Imagine standing in a crowded marketplace, shelves already empty, while people scramble for the last bags of rice or wheat. Imagine entire nations facing famine, not because of war or politics, but because the Earth itself has hidden the sun. We humans have grown used to stability. For thousands of years, the climate has been mild enough to farm, to build cities, to grow civilizations. But history shows us that nature is never stable forever. The Toba eruption nearly ended humanity's story before it even began. Could Yellowstone or another supervolcano be the force that tests our survival once more? Some might wonder, could we stop it? Could science and technology somehow prevent such a catastrophe? The sobering answer is no. We can monitor, we can measure, we can predict to some degree, but we cannot stop the Earth when it decides to release its fury. A supervolcano is beyond the reach of human control. But understanding it, preparing for it, might one day mean the difference between survival and extinction. And that is why we must not turn away from this terrifying possibility. You are watching Starsky Science. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the truths about our planet and the universe, because knowledge is the only tool we have against the unknown. As we continue, remember this: Yellowstone has erupted 3 times in the past 2 million years. The last eruption was 640,000 years ago. If you divide Earth's history into cycles, some scientists argue we are living on borrowed time. But does that mean the eruption will happen tomorrow? Not necessarily. Geological time does not follow human calendars. Yellowstone might erupt next year, or it might wait 50,000 more years. But the fact that it will erupt again is not in question. It is certain. Picture this: a farmer planting seeds under a warm spring sun. He does not know that beneath his feet lies a chamber of magma stretching for dozens of kilometers. Picture families camping near Yellowstone's lakes, laughing by the fire. They do not know that the land itself is slowly rising, swelling under pressure, breathing like a sleeping giant. Life continues above, while deep below the countdown ticks on. And when that countdown ends, no one will be truly ready. The eruption will begin with earthquakes. Some will be small, barely noticeable, rattling dishes in kitchens and windows in cabins. Others will be strong enough to frighten. Tourists will wonder if they have just experienced a tremor, unaware that these are only the first whispers of catastrophe. Then the geysers will change. Old Faithful, the world's most famous geyser, may begin to erupt irregularly, unpredictably, spewing not just water but strange gases and ash. Rangers and scientists will notice. Warnings may be issued. But even then, no one will know the exact hour, the exact day when the Earth will finally break. And then, suddenly, it will. The ground will split. The Earth will roar. The sky will ignite with a column of fire and ash, rising higher than any storm in human memory. Darkness will spread outward, covering the land mile by mile, state by state, continent by continent. Humanity will watch, powerless, as the age of the supervolcano begins again. In the first hours after the eruption, chaos would unfold on a scale we can barely imagine. The region closest to Yellowstone would be unrecognizable. Towns and cities swallowed in darkness, power lines severed, highways buried under meters of ash. Communication systems would collapse almost instantly. Those who survived the initial blast would struggle for breath as the air filled with volcanic dust, sharp particles cutting into their lungs. Within a day, ash would drift across the skies of the entire United States. Flights would be grounded, airports closed. Engines of planes, cars, and even emergency vehicles would fail as ash clogged intakes and destroyed machinery. Roads would become impassable, blanketed by thick, choking layers that no plow could clear. Millions would be stranded, isolated in silence as the ash continued to fall. In homes, the weight of ash would crush roofs. Families would huddle together in darkness, sealing windows and doors with whatever materials they could find to keep out the deadly dust. Breathing without protection would become dangerous, even lethal. Hospitals would overflow with patients suffering from suffocation and burns, but supplies would run out in days. By the end of the first week, the skies across much of North America would remain black. The sun would be nothing more than a faint glow behind the endless veil of ash. Temperatures would begin to drop. Days would feel like nights. The rhythm of life itself would break apart. Crops would already be failing in the fields. Animals would die of hunger or collapse from poisoned air and water. This is not a nightmare of imagination. This is the sober forecast of science. Climate models suggest that a supervolcano eruption could drop average global temperatures by several degrees almost instantly. That may not sound like much, but a few degrees is the difference between harvest and famine, between survival and collapse. Without the sun, photosynthesis slows to a crawl. Plants weaken, harvests shrink. Food supplies already strained by global demand would vanish within weeks. Nations would scramble to protect their reserves, and hunger would spread faster than any relief effort could match. People in distant countries, thousands of kilometers from Yellowstone, would feel the bite of hunger, the chill of sudden cold, the despair of endless, darkened skies. It is difficult for us to imagine such fragility. We live in an age where supermarkets are always full, where we expect trucks, ships, and planes to deliver food no matter what. But remove the sun for even a year, and that system collapses. Humanity, for all its power, still bows to the light of the sun. Without it, we are helpless. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now to join us as we continue this journey into the most dangerous forces shaping our world, because the more we understand, the more chance we have to endure what lies ahead. After the first week, governments across the globe would begin to react. Emergency declarations, martial law, rationing of food and water. But with transportation crippled, even the strongest nations would find their resources stretched beyond breaking. Satellite communication might continue for a time, but as power grids fail, so would the ability to coordinate rescue and aid. Dust and ash particles high in the atmosphere would begin to circle the globe, spreading far beyond North America. Within weeks, Europe,
Asia, Africa, and South America would also see dimmer skies, colder air, and contaminated rainfall. This is the global reach of a supervolcano. It is not a local disaster, it is a planetary one. The first month would feel like the end of the world, but in truth, it would only be the beginning of the long winter to come.
As the weeks turn into a month, the eruption's aftermath spreads like a shadow across the globe. The skies remain gray, the sun a faint, ghostly light struggling to break through the blanket of ash. In North America, ash still lies heavy on the ground, turning once fertile farmland into a barren desert of stone dust. Crops are dead, livestock gone, and rivers carry poison from chemical reactions in the ash. But the real catastrophe begins not just in the blast zone, but in the atmosphere above. Tiny ash particles, so light they remain suspended for years, begin to drift around the planet. Along with them rise sulfur dioxide gases, which react with water vapor high in the sky, forming a reflective haze of aerosols. This haze blocks the sun more effectively than clouds, cooling the Earth far faster than any natural cycle. Within weeks, global temperatures begin to fall. Summer feels like autumn, and autumn like the depths of winter. In places where fields should be green with harvest, farmers stare at withered stalks and frozen ground. Rain turns acidic, killing what little vegetation survives. Oceans, too, begin to shift, cooling at the surface, disrupting currents that have carried warmth around the planet for millennia. By the second month, the phrase volcanic winter becomes reality. Darkness lingers for hours each day. Not the darkness of night, but of a dim twilight where no true daylight breaks through. The Earth feels smaller, colder, more hostile. Families burn what little they have to stay warm. Hunger gnaws at entire populations. In wealthier nations, stockpiled food begins to vanish. Supermarkets are empty shells. Governments issue rations, but the supply chains that once spanned the globe are broken. Nations that once exported grain or rice hoard it for themselves. Starvation grows not just in the poorest corners of the world, but everywhere. No country is immune. Scientists predict that after a supervolcano eruption, global temperatures could drop by as much as 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. That is enough to shorten growing seasons by months. Fields that once produced abundant harvests would produce nothing at all. For a planet that depends on agriculture to feed billions, this is not just a challenge, it is a death sentence for entire societies. The silence of the skies is another sign of change. Flights remain grounded worldwide for even years after the blast, as the ash high in the stratosphere poses a constant threat to engines. The great highways of the modern world, the skies themselves, are closed. Isolation becomes normal. Nations must rely only on what they have within their borders, and for many, that will not be enough. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now, because exploring these truths, as terrifying as they are, reminds us of both the fragility and the resilience of humanity. As months pass, the cold deepens. It is no ordinary winter. Snow falls where it has never fallen before. Rivers freeze where they once flowed strong. Forests wither and die. Animals perish in silence. The entire food chain begins to collapse from the ground up. Insects that pollinate crops cannot survive. Fish stocks dwindle as water temperatures plummet. The fabric of life itself begins to unravel. Humanity would face choices it has never faced before. Migration on a massive scale, as people flee frozen regions for places still habitable, conflicts over dwindling resources, nations at war not for power, but for food, for warmth, for survival. And yet, even in the darkest projections, life does not end. Humanity may suffer, civilizations may fall,
but some will endure. Just as our ancestors survived Toba 74,000 years ago, so too would small groups find ways to adapt, to cling to life in the shadows of the volcanic winter. But the world they inherit would not be the one we know. It would be smaller, harsher, and forever changed.
Years after the eruption, the world would still be struggling to heal. The volcanic winter might last for a decade or more, each year colder than the last. Generations of children would grow up never knowing a true summer, never seeing a clear blue sky, never feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. Civilizations would shrink. Great cities might be abandoned, their towers crumbling under layers of ash and ice. Technology could survive in pockets, but without stable agriculture and trade, humanity would be forced to return to a simpler, harsher existence. Survivors would tell stories of the old world, of bright skies and endless food, as if they were myths, fading memories of a golden age swallowed by the earth itself. But slowly, the planet would begin to recover. The ash in the skies would settle, the aerosols would thin, sunlight would return, weak at first, then stronger. Plants would begin to grow again, forests would reclaim the ruins, rivers would carve new paths through the ash-covered land. Life, in its endless resilience, would find a way. And yet, humanity would never be the same. The scars of such a disaster would be etched not just in the land, but in memory. Generations would speak of the Great Darkness, the long winter, the time when the earth itself rose against them. They would remember how fragile their world truly is, and how easily it can all be taken away. This is the truth of the supervolcano. It is not just a disaster, it is a reset, a force capable of rewriting the story of life on Earth. It has happened before. It will happen again. The only uncertainty is when. And so we stand on the surface, building our homes, planting our crops, flying across the skies, living our lives. While beneath us, the Earth keeps its secrets. The magma chambers swell. The giant sleeps. But all of us know, deep down, that one day the silence will break. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now and join us as we continue to explore the mysteries, the dangers, and the wonders of the planet we call home. Because knowledge may not stop the Earth from shaking, but it might prepare us to face what comes when it does. The story of Yellowstone is not finished. It is only waiting for its next chapter. Deep beneath Yellowstone, hidden under layers of ancient rock, lies one of the most dangerous forces on Earth, a vast reservoir of molten rock stretching for miles, a supervolcano silently waiting. Most visitors to the park see geysers, hot springs, and boiling mud pools, unaware that these spectacular sights are only surface whispers of a colossal system below. The magma chamber beneath Yellowstone is unlike anything else on the planet. Imagine a body of molten rock so immense it could fill the Grand Canyon more than a dozen times. This fiery reservoir feeds the hot springs and geysers that attract millions of tourists each year. But what seems beautiful and harmless at the surface is only the tip of a monster that has reshaped the Earth many times before. Scientists studying Yellowstone have discovered that it is actually made up of two magma chambers. The upper chamber sits just a few kilometers below the surface, while the lower chamber plunges deeper into the Earth's crust, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Together, they hold unimaginable pressure, building slowly, year after year, century after century. Every small tremor, every sudden change in heat, every unusual geyser eruption is a reminder that the system is alive. Yellowstone is not dormant. It breathes, it shifts, it grows, and scientists know that one day the pressure could be too much. To track these dangers, scientists rely on an array of tools: seismographs to measure earthquakes, satellites to detect ground swelling, gas sensors to capture changes in sulfur and carbon dioxide. Each instrument watches, listens, and records, searching for the subtle signs that the Earth is preparing to wake. In recent decades, Yellowstone's ground has risen and fallen like the chest of a sleeping giant. At times, it swells more than 10 centimeters in a single year, then subsides again. These movements are a clear warning. The magma below is shifting, pushing, testing the crust that holds it in place. But here is the frightening truth. Even with all our technology, even with satellites orbiting high above, scientists cannot predict the exact moment a supervolcano will erupt. The signs may come years in advance, or they may come only hours before the blast. Humanity could be left unprepared, caught in the quiet before the storm. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now to stay with us as we uncover not just the beauty, but also the hidden dangers of our planet. For now, Yellowstone sleeps, but its history tells us the silence is temporary. Over the last 2 million years, it has erupted 3 times, each event rewriting the landscapes of North America. And when we measure the size of those eruptions, we begin to understand the scale of what could come next. To understand the threat of Yellowstone, we must first look back in time. The story of this supervolcano is written in layers of ash scattered across the continent, a record of explosions so powerful they reshaped the land itself. The first great eruption struck around 2.1 million years ago. It was one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history, blasting more than 2,500 cubic kilometers of material into the air. The blast carved out a massive depression in the Earth's crust, a caldera nearly 50 miles wide. Ash from this eruption spread across half the continent, blanketing the land in a suffocating gray that choked life and dimmed the skies for years. Then, 1.3 million years ago, Yellowstone erupted again. Though smaller than the first, it was still colossal compared to any eruption in recorded human history. This eruption created what is known as the Henry's Fork caldera in present-day Idaho, leaving behind scars still visible in the landscape today. The most recent eruption came 640,000 years ago. It unleashed nearly 1,000 cubic kilometers of ash and rock, devastating much of North America. Scientists estimate that the plume reached so high into the atmosphere that particles circled the globe, altering weather patterns and changing climates worldwide. What we now call the Yellowstone caldera, the vast sunken basin tourists walk across without realizing, is the scar of that ancient blast. Each of these eruptions was so powerful that if they had occurred in human history, civilizations would have collapsed. Entire regions would have been wiped from the map. The air would have been poisoned, agriculture destroyed, and generations forced into survival against the cold darkness of volcanic winter. Even smaller eruptions from Yellowstone have left their mark. Around 70,000 years ago, a massive lava flow covered over 1,000 square kilometers. Though it wasn't as catastrophic as a full super eruption, it reminds us that Yellowstone does not need to unleash its full fury to change the land forever. Scientists calculate that these major eruptions happen on average every 600,000 to 700,000 years. By that measure, Yellowstone is due. The last super eruption was 640,000 years ago. That number alone chills the imagination. It doesn't mean an eruption will happen tomorrow or even in the next 1,000 years, but it means the clock is ticking and the Earth keeps its own schedule. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now because in learning the past, we prepare ourselves for the future. Yellowstone has erupted before. It will erupt again. The question that haunts scientists, governments, and all of us who live in its shadow is not if, but when.
Imagine it happens without warning. One morning, Yellowstone erupts. The first signs are a violent swarm of earthquakes, shaking buildings across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Tourists in Yellowstone National Park watch in horror as geysers explode out of sequence, boiling water shooting higher than ever before. Then comes the roar, a sound so deep and powerful it seems to tear the air itself apart. The ground splits open. A column of ash, gas, and molten rock blasts upward with the force of nuclear bombs detonating every second. Within minutes, the eruption climbs past the clouds, past the stratosphere, into the very edge of space. The sky over Yellowstone darkens. In less than an hour, ash begins to fall across hundreds of miles. Towns in Wyoming vanish under black snow. Roofs collapse from the sheer weight. People choke as volcanic ash fills their lungs, clogging cars, water supplies, and even jet engines in the skies above. Airports across the United States are shut down instantly. Air travel halts. Roads jam with panicked families fleeing, but ash blinds drivers and buries highways. Emergency systems struggle to respond, but communication lines fail under the chaos. The modern world, built on speed and connection, begins to fracture in hours. By the end of the first day, more than half of the continental United States is covered in ash. Cities like Denver and Salt Lake City are blanketed in layers several inches thick. Power grids begin to collapse under the weight. Water systems are poisoned. Food distribution halts. Entire states fall into silence. And yet, the eruption is just beginning. The towering ash cloud now stretches across North America, carried by winds into the Midwest, then the East Coast. Within 24 hours, Washington, D.C., New York, and Chicago find their skies darkened. Flights are grounded worldwide as ash spreads across the jet stream. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now because what you are hearing is not fiction. It is science, and it could one day become reality. The first day is only the start. The days to come will bring a darkness deeper than anything humanity has faced in recorded history.
In the first week after the eruption, the world is no longer the same. Ash continues to fall like a deadly snow, covering much of the United States in a suffocating gray. Cities struggle to breathe. Hospitals overflow with people suffering from lung damage as microscopic shards of volcanic glass tear through their airways. Farms are buried. Crops rot beneath layers of ash. Livestock suffocate. Fresh water becomes undrinkable, contaminated with toxic chemicals released from deep within the earth. Millions of people are displaced, searching for food, shelter, and safety. But every road, every airport, every railway is paralyzed. The ash cloud spreads further. By the second week, much of the northern hemisphere is under a dark veil. Sunlight weakens. Days feel like twilight, even at noon. Temperatures begin to drop, first slowly, then rapidly as less sunlight reaches the ground. Within a month, the planet enters what scientists call a volcanic winter. Average global temperatures fall by several degrees. It may not sound like much, but for Earth's fragile climate, it is devastating. Summers vanish. Winters grow colder. Rain patterns shift, turning fertile farmland into wasteland. Global supply chains collapse. The world economy crumbles. Countries far from Yellowstone, Europe, Asia, Africa, feel the impact as food shortages spread. Crops fail across continents. Famine begins to stalk humanity, not for weeks, but for years. As nations struggle to survive, governments enforce rationing, borders tighten, and conflicts rise over dwindling resources. For the first time in history, every country on Earth faces the same enemy: a sky that refuses to clear and a sun that refuses to shine. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now because understanding the science behind these events is the first step toward understanding our own fragile survival. And yet, this is only the beginning. What follows is a test not just of technology or governments, but of humanity itself.
As the weeks turn into months, the ash in the atmosphere thickens. Sunlight struggles to break through. Temperatures plummet worldwide. What began as a regional disaster in North America becomes a planetary crisis. By the third month, the Earth is in the grip of a volcanic winter. Crops fail across Asia, Europe, and Africa. Rice paddies in Asia, wheat fields in America, corn in South America. Nothing grows as it once did. The world's food reserves, already stretched thin, vanish in record time. Famine spreads like a shadow. Nations that depend on imports are the first to collapse. Countries with vast populations face starvation on an unimaginable scale. Human society, so used to abundance, is suddenly fighting for survival at its most basic level: food, water, warmth. Global temperatures may drop by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. That is colder than the last ice age. Rivers freeze, lakes shrink, glaciers expand. Growing seasons shorten to the point of vanishing. Humanity's breadbaskets turn into frozen deserts. Energy systems strain under demand. People burn anything they can to stay warm. Forests are cut down. Air pollution rises. Disease follows hunger and cold, spreading quickly in weakened populations. Cities empty out as millions flee in search of shelter, but there is nowhere left untouched by the supervolcano's reach. Governments collapse. Borders dissolve into chaos. Wars break out over the few surviving resources: clean water, stockpiled food, usable farmland. In this new world, the power of nations is measured not by wealth or armies, but by access to calories. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now, because the science is not just about what might happen, it is about what we must be prepared to face. The eruption itself may last only days or weeks, but its shadow could linger for decades. And if history is any guide, Yellowstone's fury has the power not just to scar landscapes, but to end civilizations.
As volcanic winter deepens, Earth's ecosystems unravel. Forests, grasslands, and oceans, all interconnected, all dependent on sunlight, begin to wither. Photosynthesis falters, plants die first, unable to survive without sunlight. Fields once green with life turn gray and barren. Without plants, herbivores starve, and without herbivores, predators soon follow. Insects, normally resilient, collapse in vast numbers. Pollinators, like bees, vanish, shattering the cycle of reproduction for countless crops and wild plants. Rivers fill with dead fish, as toxic ash and acid rain poison the waters. The oceans, already stressed by warming and pollution, are pushed into further chaos as plankton populations, the foundation of the marine food chain, crash. Species after species begins to disappear. Some die directly from the cold and famine, others from the chain reaction of collapse, rippling across ecosystems. Humanity, for the first time in its history, watches mass extinction unfold not over centuries, but within years. Animals that survive do so not through strength, but chance. Scavengers thrive for a time, feeding on the dead. Rodents, insects in sheltered niches, and certain hardy species persist. But large mammals, the elephants, lions, bears, even humans, face their greatest test. The planet itself begins to resemble an alien world. Skies are dim, the air heavy with sulfur, the ground scarred with ash. This is not the Earth humanity grew up in. It is something new, something hostile, something unforgiving. And yet, life endures.
It always has. In the smallest cracks, the tiniest organisms survive, waiting for the day the skies clear. But for humanity, survival is not guaranteed. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now because knowing the fragility of our ecosystems is the key to understanding how fragile our own future is. When the skies finally clear, it will not be the same Earth that emerges. It will be a world reborn from ash, and the survivors will face the challenge of rebuilding civilization from the ruins.
The eruption has ended, but the silence that follows is far more terrifying. Across the land, the ground is blanketed in gray ash, a barren desert where once forests, rivers, and cities thrived. The sky above remains dim, the sun a pale, ghostly disk barely visible through layers of volcanic dust. Humanity has survived the first strike, but the war for survival is only beginning. Communities that once relied on steady supply chains find themselves cut off. Supermarkets are empty within days. Trucks no longer move. Planes no longer fly. And trains lie abandoned beneath blankets of ash. What people once took for granted, bread, milk, clean water, vanishes almost overnight. The first instinct is to flee. But where? The highways are clogged with abandoned cars, their engines destroyed by ash. Roads are buried, airports unusable. Entire regions lie paralyzed. For many, survival now depends not on escape, but endurance, finding a way to hold out in the ruins of the world they once knew. In the small towns nearest Yellowstone, survival chances are almost non-existent. The ashfall is too heavy, roofs collapse, air is unbreathable. Entire communities disappear, their names destined to be remembered only in tragedy. Those who fled early become refugees, wandering with whatever they could carry, searching for shelter in less devastated areas. Further away, in cities like Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, the situation is different, but no less dire. Ash clouds dim the skies, causing power grids to falter as solar panels fail and coal plants struggle against contaminated air. Food shipments stop. Within a week, shelves are bare. Within 2, hunger gnaws at millions. Governments, already overwhelmed, declare states of emergency. Martial law spreads. Soldiers patrol the streets not only to maintain order, but to guard dwindling food reserves. The ration system begins. Tiny packets of rice, canned beans, bottles of purified water. For the billions used to choice, luxury, and plenty, the world suddenly shrinks to survival rations. But fear is stronger than hunger. Ashfall does not stop. It infiltrates lungs, houses, even water tanks. Children cough, elderly suffocate, and hospitals are overwhelmed. Masks and filters become more valuable than gold. Soon, there aren't enough to go around. In the countryside, survival takes another form. Families and small communities retreat into bunkers, basements, and improvised shelters. Those with stockpiled food, preppers once mocked by society, suddenly find themselves the most prepared. But even stockpiles run out, and without sunlight, farming becomes impossible. Greenhouses collapse under the weight of ash. Livestock die of starvation or poisoned water. By the first month, a grim realization sets in. This is not a temporary disaster. This is the new Earth. The global economy collapses entirely. Stock markets never reopen. Currencies lose meaning. People no longer trade in dollars, yen, or euros, but in calories, in clean water, in shelter from the cold. A single can of food is worth more than a pile of money. Civilization itself has shifted. In Asia, billions face famine. China, India, and Southeast Asia, all dependent on massive annual harvests, watch their fields wither under a dim sky.
The monsoons shift, rainfall patterns collapse, and rivers no longer flow as they once did. Hunger riots spread across cities. Governments respond with force, but order collapses as fast as the food supply. In Africa, where survival already balanced on fragile systems, disaster accelerates. Crops fail, imports stop, and aid vanishes. Entire regions sink into famine. Populations migrate en masse, searching for food in lands that have none to give. In Europe, with its modern infrastructure, initially seems better prepared. But as weeks turn into months, the same problems arrive. Food stores deplete. Gas and oil, once abundant, cannot heat entire nations during a volcanic winter. Starvation spreads in waves. Borders tighten. Nations turn inward, hoarding what little they have. In South America, drought and frost grip fertile regions. Brazil's rainforests, already under stress, begin to collapse. Rivers shrink. Argentina's vast fields yield nothing. Countries accustomed to being exporters of food suddenly become importers, but there is nothing left to import. In North America, the epicenter of disaster becomes unrecognizable. Millions displaced by ash moved southward toward Mexico and Central America. Borders crumble under the weight of desperate refugees. Violence becomes common, not from malice, but from hunger. Families kill for bread. Communities dissolve into survival groups. And through it all, humanity's psychology shifts. Fear becomes the air people breathe. Some cling to hope that governments will restore order, that scientists will find a solution. Others turn to despair, surrendering to hunger and cold. Religious movements surge, preaching that the end of days has arrived. Desperate populations listen, searching for meaning in catastrophe. Yet, in the darkest moments, sparks of resilience appear. In underground bunkers, scientists gather, pooling knowledge to find ways to grow crops without sunlight, hydroponics, fungi, and algae. In broken cities, small groups organize, sharing resources, building makeshift shelters, protecting one another from violence. Hope does not vanish, it flickers, fragile but alive. But the struggle is brutal. Families are torn apart, communities fracture. For every group that survives, another perishes. The volcanic winter is merciless, showing no regard for wealth, power, or status. Billionaires in fortified mansions suffered the same cold as farmers in ruined fields. Survival is the great equalizer. 2 months in, the human population has already shrunk dramatically. Estimates suggest tens of millions dead, and this is only the beginning. Starvation accelerates, disease spreads, and violence claims lives in cities where law has collapsed. The rebuilding of civilization now depends on one question: who can adapt? In underground labs, seeds are preserved. Scientists work by artificial light, powered by dwindling reserves of fuel. Their goal is to engineer crops that can grow in low light, in cold, in hostile soil. Whether they succeed will determine the survival of billions. Meanwhile, military powers across the globe seize what resources they can. Armies march not for conquest, but for food. Wars erupt, not over ideology, but survival. Nations clash for fertile land, freshwater lakes, and hidden stockpiles. It is a new world war, fought in the ashes of the old. Yet even amid collapse, stories of human courage emerge. Villages that share their last bread, doctors who treat the sick with no supplies, strangers who protect one another in the chaos. These stories matter, for they remind humanity that survival is not just about food and water, but about spirit. This is Starsky's Science. Subscribe now, because the science of survival is not a tale of fiction, it is the blueprint of what could one day be reality. The first chapter of humanity's rebuilding is brutal, uncertain, and unforgiving. And the greatest test lies ahead, not merely to survive the volcanic winter, but to rebuild a world where life can thrive once again.
The months stretch on and the world grows colder. The ash that first fell like snow now hardens into layers, burying farmlands, clogging rivers, and collapsing ecosystems. The sun is still hidden, its warmth a distant memory. Humanity has entered a volcanic winter, and survival has become the only measure of success. In bunkers deep underground, scientists race against time. They know that humanity cannot endure without food, and so they turn to solutions once dismissed as science fiction. Hydroponics, plants grown without soil, becomes a lifeline. In sealed chambers lit by artificial lamps, small patches of vegetables grow. They are meager, fragile, but they are proof that survival is possible. Fungi and algae become the new staples of human diets. In dark conditions where crops cannot grow, mushrooms thrive. Labs cultivate spirulina, chlorella, and other algae, rich in protein, grown in tanks filled with nutrient solutions. What once was health food for a niche market now becomes the foundation of human survival. But technology has limits. Artificial lights need electricity, and fuel is scarce. Nations turn to nuclear power plants, not for luxury, but for survival. These reactors, once controversial, now stand as beacons of energy in a world darkened by ash. Communities that once mocked science now cling to it. Survival is no longer about wealth, but about knowledge. Those who understand biology, engineering, and medicine are more valuable than kings. Outside the bunkers, life takes a harsher form. Refugee camps spread along borders, tens of thousands gathered under makeshift tents, shivering in volcanic winter. Governments try to deliver aid, but trucks sink into ash, planes cannot fly, and ships struggle with blocked harbors. Disease spreads through camps: cholera, pneumonia, dysentery, each outbreak claiming lives faster than any relief can arrive. Desperation reshapes societies. Old governments fracture under pressure. Nations once proud of democracy and freedom now impose strict controls, rationing every calorie, every drop of clean water. Authoritarian systems rise, some out of necessity, others out of ambition. Humanity discovers a brutal truth, that in times of collapse, survival often demands sacrifice of liberty. Yet, not all societies turn to tyranny. In some places, small democratic communities flourish, built on cooperation and trust. Villages share food collectively, rotate labor, and protect each other from violence. These enclaves become islands of hope in a sea of chaos, showing that solidarity can be as powerful as force. Religion and philosophy undergo a transformation. For some, the eruption is divine punishment, a cleansing fire. Apocalyptic cults rise, promising salvation through devotion. For others, it is a reminder of nature's indifference, a call to humility before forces larger than humanity. In dim shelters, people gather not only for food, but for meaning, for hope that existence is not futile. By the second year after the eruption, the human population has been cut nearly in half. Entire regions lie barren. The old world order, global markets, international trade, multinational corporations has collapsed. In its place, a patchwork of survival communities, fortified city-states, and underground bunkers emerges. Technology shifts with necessity. Instead of luxury devices, people invent tools for farming in darkness, water purification, and ash-resistant breathing systems. The new engineers are not designing smartphones, but systems to keep air breathable and water drinkable. Children grow up in this new world never knowing blue skies or green fields. They are taught not history as it was, but survival skills: how to filter ash from water, how to grow fungi in damp rooms, and how to recognize edible plants among the ruins. An entire generation becomes defined by resilience. Meanwhile, nations clash over survival. Russia and China, with vast territories, attempt to consolidate resources.
Europe struggles to hold its borders as waves of famine-driven migration sweep across it. The United States, once the most powerful nation, lies fractured by disaster at its very heart, its people scattered, its institutions weakened. Wars erupt, but they are not wars of ideology. They are wars of survival. Armies march not to conquer, but to seize farmland that can still produce, rivers that still flow, stockpiles that still exist. Cities burn not from bombs, but from hunger and desperation. Yet, amid war, science persists. In Switzerland, scientists develop underground vaults where artificial ecosystems thrive, miniature worlds with controlled temperature, air, and light. In Japan, engineers perfect systems for vertical farming in sealed towers. In Africa, small communities discover innovative ways to trap condensation and harvest water from ash clouds. These pockets of ingenuity light the path toward a future where humanity might adapt to a world forever changed. Slowly, whispers of a new civilization begin to emerge. Leaders, scientists, and survivors alike realize that the old world cannot return. The age of endless consumption, of global markets, and unchecked growth has ended. In its place, humanity must build something new, smaller, tougher, more sustainable. The volcanic winter has taught bitter lessons that dependence on fragile supply chains is fatal, that unchecked exploitation of nature leaves humanity vulnerable, that survival requires not just intelligence, but cooperation. By the 5th year after the eruption, the skies begin to clear slightly. The sun, though weak, pierces the ash veil for the first time in years. Crops tentatively return in certain areas, though the soil remains poisoned and the climate unstable. It is not a full recovery, but it is hope. The survivors, fewer in number but hardened by experience, begin to rebuild in earnest. Ash is cleared from rivers, soil is treated, forests are replanted. New settlements rise, not built of glass and steel, but of practicality, structures designed to endure, not impress. But memory is the strongest force. Those who lived through the volcanic winter carry scars deeper than hunger and cold. They remember the collapse of nations, the suffering of billions, the fragility of civilization itself. For them, rebuilding is not about restoring the past. It is about preventing it from ever happening again. Humanity emerges smaller, humbler, but wiser. A civilization reborn, not from triumph, but from tragedy. A reminder etched in ash and stone that the earth is powerful and humanity is fragile. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now, because the story of survival is not just about science. It is about us, about what it means to endure, adapt, and rise again from the ashes.
The volcanic winter eventually loosens its grip. Ash clouds, once a permanent ceiling above the earth, begin to thin. Weak sunlight filters through, illuminating a scarred world. Forests have vanished, rivers run sluggish with silt, oceans are altered. Yet slowly, life stirs again. Plants sprout from the ash, small and stubborn, pushing through soil poisoned but not lifeless. Pioneer species, mosses, lichens, and hardy grasses, take root first, beginning the long process of ecological healing. Birds return in scattered flocks, their songs faint compared to the past, but a promise of renewal. Insects crawl, pollinating the few blossoms that dare open. The earth is wounded, but it is not defeated. Humanity, fewer in number, watches this rebirth with awe. For years they lived in darkness, in fear, in hunger. Now they see light again, though it is pale and fractured. Generations born under gray skies glimpse blue for the first time, and their world expands beyond survival. But the survivors are not the same as their ancestors.
The age of excess is over. They carry memories of famine, ash, and loss. They know how fragile life is, how quickly civilizations collapse, and so their priorities shift. They no longer dream of endless growth or unchecked ambition. They dream of balance. New societies emerge, built on lessons carved by suffering. Energy is used with caution, water treated as sacred, food shared carefully. Communities rely on sustainable farming, recycling, and cooperative living. What once seemed like restrictions now feel like wisdom. Philosophies change too. Humanity begins to see itself not as the master of Earth, but as its guest, humbled by forces beyond control. Religions speak of survival as grace. Cultures celebrate resilience as the highest virtue. Children are taught not only history, but humility, the reminder that the world is vast and humans are small. Technology does not disappear. Instead, it transforms. Instead of building weapons or luxuries, scientists focus on preserving life. Solar mirrors are designed to maximize weak sunlight. Crops are engineered to grow in poor soils. Medicine adapts to treat diseases born from ash and famine. Humanity learns to innovate not for profit, but for survival. Still, scars remain. Entire species are gone, wiped out in a few short years. Oceans remain altered, with ecosystems forever changed. Some regions are deserts of ash, uninhabitable for centuries. Human population, once in billions, is reduced to millions. Every survivor carries grief, and every settlement remembers the silence of mass death. Yet, out of grief comes unity. Nations that once fought for dominance now cooperate out of necessity. Borders soften, trade networks reform, not for luxury, but for essentials. Old rivalries lose meaning when compared to the shared memory of collapse. For the first time in centuries, humanity begins to act less like divided nations and more like a single species. But the memory of the supervolcano remains. Every story, every culture, every settlement tells the tale: the day the sky turned black, the years of darkness, the survival through ash. Monuments are built, not to kings or generals, but to the victims of famine and the resilience of survivors. The eruption becomes both a scar and a scripture, a reminder of fragility, a guide for the future. Generations born after recovery inherit a new kind of world. They do not see skyscrapers or sprawling cities of glass. They see compact settlements, powered by clean energy, surrounded by fields carefully nurtured. They do not live in blind faith of stability. They live with the constant awareness that disaster can return. And perhaps that awareness is humanity's greatest strength. For in remembering its near extinction, humanity learns caution, learns gratitude, learns how to exist not above nature, but within it. The earth, too, carries memory. Ash layers remain buried in soil, fossils of a catastrophe etched into stone. Centuries later, scientists will dig through these layers and marvel at how close life came to ending and how it endured. The supervolcano was not the end. It was a trial, a crucible, a reshaping of civilization itself. Humanity, scarred but alive, rises again, not as the same species it once was, but as something tempered, wiser, and perhaps finally ready to live in balance with its world. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now, because the story of the Earth's rebirth is more than history. It is a glimpse into our future and a warning of how fragile that future truly is.
From the ashes of catastrophe, science rises with new urgency. The survivors understand one truth above all others: knowledge is the only shield against extinction. Before the eruption, supervolcanoes were studied,
but often dismissed as distant threats, events too rare to worry about. After Yellowstone, no one doubts their reality. Scientists rebuild their instruments, install seismographs across volcanic regions, satellites monitor the Earth's crust from orbit. Every tremor is recorded, every rise in temperature studied. The planet itself becomes the subject of constant vigilance. Massive databases are created, storing not only scientific records, but the memories of survivors. What food lasted longest? What shelters worked best? What mistakes led to tragedy? All documented, all preserved for future generations. The mistakes of the past will not be repeated. International cooperation grows from necessity. No nation can face a supervolcano alone. Shared monitoring systems link continents together. A tremor beneath Indonesia or Italy is not just local news, it is global concern. Humanity begins to treat the Earth as one shared home, where the eruption of a single mountain can reshape the entire future. Technology adapts to prevention, though true prevention remains beyond reach. No human engineering can stop the power of a supervolcano, but mitigation, lessening the impact, is possible. Underground bunkers store decades' worth of seeds, DNA, and knowledge, ready to regrow the world if disaster returns. Giant silos store grains in regions most likely to survive. New crops are engineered to grow in low light and cold climates, ensuring at least some food remains even during volcanic winter. Some scientists dream of geoengineering, ways to counter the ash and sulfur in the sky. Reflective mirrors in orbit, chemical injections to balance the atmosphere, vast filters to clean the air. These projects remain theories, fragile ideas tested in small scales, but they show humanity's determination to fight, to refuse extinction. And yet, even as technology grows, humility remains. Humanity now knows its limits. No matter how advanced, no matter how powerful, it is still at the mercy of the earth beneath its feet. That knowledge reshapes philosophy, culture, even politics. The arrogance of dominance fades, replaced by caution and reverence. Schools teach children about supervolcanoes not as abstract geology, but as lived history. Textbooks carry the stories of ash and hunger. Simulations are run, drills practiced. Preparedness becomes a way of life. Just as coastal cities once prepared for tsunamis, now the world prepares for the shaking of the earth. But there is a deeper question, one that science cannot answer. Can humanity ever truly be ready? No bunker, no seed vault, no plan can erase the scale of a supervolcano. At best, they soften the blow, they increase the odds. But survival will always depend on resilience, unity, and the will to endure. Perhaps that is the ultimate lesson of Yellowstone's eruption, not that we can control the Earth, but that we must learn to live with its cycles, its violence, its patience. Survival is not about defeating nature, it is about understanding it. And so, the scientists continue their work. Satellites scan fault lines, AI models predict eruptions, and laboratories test new ways to farm in darkness. But alongside them, philosophers, artists, and teachers remind humanity why it struggles. Because life is precious, fragile, and irreplaceable. The next eruption may not come for centuries, or it may come tomorrow. No one knows. What humanity does know is that ignorance is no longer an option. The Earth has spoken once, and it will speak again. The only question is, will we be listening? This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now, because the more we understand our planet's secrets, the better chance we have of surviving the next great test.
Imagine standing on a quiet plain where once fire and ash consumed the sky. The Earth feels calm now, but beneath the surface, titanic forces still wait. Pressure builds, magma stirs, and time moves on with the patience of stone. Humanity walks upon this fragile crust, never fully knowing when the ground will awaken again. The Yellowstone eruption was not just a geological event, it was a turning point in human history. Billions gone, ecosystems erased, civilizations humbled. Yet from the ashes, a smaller, wiser humanity emerged. They learned that survival depends not on conquering nature, but on respecting it. Ash still lingers in the soil, silent evidence of what happened. Forests regrow, animals return, rivers carve new paths, but the memory remains. Every sunrise feels fragile, every harvest a miracle. Children are taught that their world is borrowed, not owned, that the earth is older, stronger, and indifferent. And maybe that humility is the greatest gift hidden within the tragedy. For only when we are reminded of our fragility do we truly understand the value of life. Every breath of clean air, every drop of clear water, every beam of sunlight cutting through the clouds, each becomes sacred when we know how easily it can vanish. The story of the supervolcano is not just about destruction. It is about resilience, adaptation, and the unbreakable will to continue. Humanity stood on the edge of extinction and refused to fall. That refusal, that determination is what defines us. But let us never forget, this was not the last warning. Beneath our feet lie dozens of sleeping giants, calderas scattered across the globe. Each one holds the power to rewrite history. The question is not if they will erupt, but when. We cannot stop them. We cannot silence the earth. But we can prepare. We can learn. We can build a future that bends but does not break. So the next time you look at the horizon, remember what sleeps beneath it. The world we walk on is alive, and it will remind us of its power again. Until then, humanity carries on, scarred, wiser, fragile, but still dreaming beneath the restless sky. This is Starsky Science. Subscribe now because the story of Earth is not finished, and neither is ours.